Good morning. Hello, fellow fish detectives. We are going to be reading Nancy Drew, The Haunted Bridge. It is, sorry, the 15th in the series. I'm not going in any particular order, just felt like reading The Haunted Bridge this morning. And so let's get ready. Our little bookmarker, sword. And so here is the little intro overview. The Haunted Bridge. Mr. Drew is on the trail of an international ring of jewel thieves and asks Nancy to assist him. The trail leads to a summer resort area. Before Nancy has a chance to start work on her father's case, a golf caddy tells her a frightening tale. In the dense woods nearby is an old wooden footbridge guarded by a ghost. Intrigued by the caddy's story, Nancy decides to investigate. Several riddles confront the young detective as she attempts to solve the mystery of the haunted bridge and track down a woman suspected of being a key member of the gang of jewel thieves. How Nancy finds the answers to the two mysteries and at the same time, despite her injured hand, wins a trophy in a golf tournament will thrill all Nancy Drew. And then, so in these books, they sometimes show pictures. So if you're watching, paper in Nancy's hand. Dun dun! Let's get ready for chapter one. Chapter one. Chapter one is invitation. Sorry. Invitation to mystery. Sorry, miss, but I wouldn't go near that bridge for $1 million, said the young freckled-faced caddy. Why, Chris? Nancy Drew asked him. She had just driven her golf ball over 200 yards into a patch of woods bordering the 16th hole. A rustic footbridge stood at the far side of it. Because the place is haunted, that's why. Nancy, a slender, attractive girl of 18 with reddish blonde hair, was intrigued. She requested more details. She got to know the tea. Before Chris could answer, the other girls who were in Nancy's threesome walked toward her with their caddies. What's up? Asked George Fane, a trim-looking brunette with short hair and a boyish name. The bridge in there has a ghost guarding it, Chris replied. Isn't that right, fellows? The other caddies nodded and cast wary glances among the trees. The third girl, blonde, pretty Bess Mulvin, gasped. "A a real ghost?" "That's right, Miss," Chris told her. "You'd better not hang around here." Nancy spat. "What will the ghost do to me?" "Who knows?" Chris retorted and started to move up. Sure wouldn't like to take your ball. And he might strike you. Come on, take a penalty stroke. I guess we better, Bess agreed. There's a foursome right behind us. Shall we signal them to play through? No, we may as well go on, Nancy decided. Her caddy was obviously relieved. You couldn't have played her behind all those trees anyway, he said. It's a shame, George commented. You had such a great score up to now, Nancy. I hate to see you lose a stroke. Nancy's curiosity about the haunted bridge distracted her attention from the game, and she scored a disappointing double goal for the hole. Oh, you should have had a par, George murmured sympathetically. Nancy smiled. I've learned never to count my score until the last hole is played. Here is the picture, sorry, of Nancy being like, "What's a ghost gonna do? I'm gonna be fine, though, Nancy." Oh, you'll certainly qualify for the tournament, Bess insisted. That is, if you don't let your mind wander off on the mystery. Rusty's number well. The three girls were spending a few weeks at the Deer Mountain Hotel as guests of Nancy's father, Parson Drew. He had come there on legal business. The summer resort with its many sports activities was a contrast to the comparative quiet of River Heights, their hometown, and the girls were enjoying every minute of the vacation. Before their arrival, Mr. Drew had hinted that he might ask Nancy to aid him with the puzzling case he was handling. As yet, he had not explained what the work involved. As you can see, I make a lot of comments, and I think my anxiety and like wanting to know would be really bugging me. Like, tell me more. During the lawyer's lengthy absences from the hotel, the girls had been swimming and playing tennis and golf. George and Bess thoroughly enjoyed golf. Both played well, but it was Nancy's scores which had attracted the attention of the club's golf pro. He had urged her to enter the qualifying round of an important championship tournament for amateur golf to be held shortly. Nancy felt she could offer little competition to the excellent women players at the hotel, but Bess and George had persuaded her to try out, and finally she had consented. You'll bring home the trophy, Nancy, George declared as the girls finished playing the 17th hole. When they approached the 18th tee, they noticed that another player was there ahead of them. He was a tall, thin man in his late 20s, immaculately dressed in white flat, bushy black hair, and a beard partially covered his angular, hard face. Not that face. Oh, he's Martin Bartescu, Nancy said in an undertone. Let's slow up. The warning was too late. Bartescu had seen the girls. He waved and waited for them to approach. We would have run. We would have to run into him, Bess commented in disgust. Martin Fortescue had met the girls the previous evening, and immediately he had tried to make a golfing date with Nancy. Although she had heard the man was a very good player, she had taken an instant dislike to him and politely declined the invitation. Sometimes you just no. No. Obviously, he liked to brag, and she doubted the truth of his many stories of being friends with famous people. Now, as the girls seated themselves on a bench directly behind the drive area, he did not tee off. Instead, Alexei smiled and walked over to them. May I have the honor of playing in with you, young ladies? He asked engagingly. We may as well all walk together, Nancy replied politely, but with no warmth in her voice. She drove a long, straight ball, while Bess and George played somewhat shorter ones down the fairway. Barsu's drive outdistanced Nancy's, As the group moved along, he walked beside her. "You play a fine game," Nancy said. "I was just thinking that you might like to enter the mixed foursome tournament with me next. Together, we will win first place." "I may not be here that long," Nancy replied. Bardescu looked disappointed. "I've played golf courses all over the world," he boasted. "Once I played the Prince of Wales." "And did you defeat him?" Nancy asked, trying to hide a smile. "Well, yes, I did," Bardescu admitted, "but only by a couple of strokes. Oh, I've often played with royalty." By this time Nancy had reached her ball. When she was about to hit it, Bardescu stepped closer. His movement distracted her as she took her back swing. As a result, she dug the shot. Too bad," he muttered sympathetically. "You pulled in your elbow just as you struck the ball. Here, let me show you." He took the club from the girl's hand, and to the annoyance of the trio, insisted upon giving a demonstration of what he considered to be Nancy's fault. Without commenting on his criticism, Nancy walked to her ball and in her usual good form hit a beautiful shot down the middle of the fairway. "That's fine," Darcy cried. "You'll make a par five on this hole the way the pros do." Determined to play her best, Nancy approached the 18th green. Her ball was only 5 feet from the cup. Intensely annoyed because Bardescu was still offering advice, she stepped up to putt. The ball rolled in a straight line toward the cup and came to a stop at the very edge of it. "Oh, Nancy, what a shame!" Bess wailed. Immediately, Bardescu jumped up and down on the ground. The vibration caused the ball to drop into the cup. "There, Nancy, you made a par five." "That wasn't fair, Mr. Bardescu," she said severely. "I'll add an extra putt, that which gives me a 6." "But why? You didn't strike the ball." The girls smiled coldly. Murmuring a few polite phrases, they left the man staring blankly after them and walked to the hotel. "Of all the conceited people," Bess exclaimed when they were beyond Bardescu's range of hearing, "I'll bet he never came within a mile of royalty, to say nothing of defeating the Prince of Wales by a couple of strokes." "And he made you miss your shot, Nancy," George stated irritably. "You'll surely qualify anyway," I said as she studied the scoreboards. "George has an 85. My score is a disgraceful 90. But, Nancy, you have a brilliant 75. "I wonder what became of my caddy," Nancy said. "I forgot to pay Chris. Also, I wanted to question him about that bridge." "I suppose you'll want to inspect it," Bess said. "Well, if there's anything spooky about it, count me out when you investigate it." "Do you think there's something to what Chris said?" George put in. Nancy shrugged and replied, "I'm going to talk to him and find out more about the mystery of the haunted bridge." Name of our book. Before the girls had a chance to search for Chris, Bardescu approached them in the hotel lobby. "Oh, I wonder if you'd like to attend." "Not just now," Nancy said quickly. "I must find my caddy." "I'll go with you," the man began, but Nancy pretended not to hear him and excused herself. She retraced her steps to the 18th green. The several caddies were lingering nearby. Hers was not among them. She questioned another boy about them. "This is just starting out with the twosome," he said. "You might catch him at the first tee." Nancy thanked the boy and hastened to the starting point, which was hidden from her view by a wing of the Deer Mountain Hotel. Two men had just teed off. As she approached them, she observed Chris starting down the fairway behind the players. "Oh, Chris, just a minute." Nancy hailed him. "I forgot to pay you," she added with a smile. taking some money from her pocket. I want to ask you about the Hampton Bridge. I can't stop to talk now, the boy replied. I understand, but will you meet me near the caddy house after you've finished work? Nancy requested. About 5 o'clock. I'll be there, Chris promised. He hurried off, and Nancy slowly made her way back to the hotel lobby, where she found Bess and George talking to Martin Markskew. He was telling them about the many prominent persons with whom he was acquainted. I believe I'll turn my scorecard into the tournament cheer now, answered the girls. If one of you will attest it. Here, allow me, interrupted Barskew. Before Nancy could prevent him, he had taken the scorecard. As he signed his name, Nancy noted a rather curious thing. It seemed to her that he formed each letter with painful precision. Why? Was he trying to disguise his handwriting? Wonder. I guess we'll find out, right? In chapter 2. Chapter 2. Unlucky Fall. Nancy took her scorecard from Martin Barskew and walked on with Beth and George. Knowing the card had to be signed by someone accompanying her throughout the game, she asked George to attest the score. Then Nancy gave the card to the tournament chairman, who was in his office, busily typing up the results of the day's matches. A fine score, Miss Drew, he praised her. Do you think she will qualify for the tournament? Beth asked the man eagerly. She certainly will, unless better scores come into it, he replied. However, the competition is very keen this year. Some of the best women golfers in the state are entering the tournament. I feel very fortunate if I so much as qualify, Nancy replied. I understand there's to be a tournament for men too. Yes, I have internet, said a voice behind me. I glanced around to find Butterscotch standing there. So far, my score is the lowest today. That's great. Nancy murmured indifferently, hurrying away with her friend. Good. Well, that's Nancy and you're stuck with him. You press the I dislike his type, and you both knew it, Nancy replied. But one thing about him did catch you in interest. Basket. What was that? His ultra-modern clothes? Oh, that's of course not, Nancy said. I was interested in the way he signed my score. Did you notice how unnaturally he wrote his signature as if he were trying to disguise his usual style of writing? Or maybe his handwriting or something. Maybe find out. Oh, no, George admitted in surprise. You seem to observe everything, Nancy. I guess that's why she has solved so many baffling mysteries. Aside, Nancy knows how to make use of her eyes, and we don't. Dad trained me to be observant, Nancy said. As the girls started down the hall toward their rooms, she thought proudly of her father, Carson Drew, whose fame as a criminal lawyer was nationwide. Through helping him, Nancy herself had achieved distinction. She was now a well-known amateur detective, with a long list of successful mystery cases to her credit. The most recent one, the Whispering Statue. Nancy's father was very proud of her, too. Mrs. Drew had died when Nancy was only 3 years old. Since their home had been managed by a livable Nancy Bruin, an excellent housekeeper. Thinking of the woman who had cared for her like a mother, Nancy said, can you imagine what Hannah would say if she knew I was starting another mystery? She'd say, now, Nancy, promise you'll be careful. Bess replied with a grin. Laughing, the three entered the cousin's beautifully furnished bedroom. Speaking of the mystery, said George, did you learn anything about the haunted bridge? Not yet, Nancy answered, glancing at her wristwatch. Come to me, Chris asked. Nancy found him waiting for her at the caddy house. He made no comment as she led him to a bench at the rear of the hotel. Please tell me everything you know about that bridge. She asked him. How do you see it haunted? Because it is, the boy insisted. All the caddies will tell you the same. Sometimes you can see the ghost walking over it. At night? Daytime, too. It waves its arms slowly back and forth. And sometimes the ghost screams as if it's in pain. Have you actually seen and heard this yourself? Sure. That's why I know better than to go into the woods. You mean you've never been up close to the ghost? Nancy inquired, smiling. The boy frowned and said, you couldn't hire any of the guys to go near the place. Are the bridge and surrounding property owned by the hotel? Nancy asked. Before Chris could reply, the caddy master appeared to inform the boy he was wanted immediately at the caddy house. I have to go now, Chris told Nancy. Thank you for telling me about the ghost, she said. And by the way, if I qualify, would you like to caddy for me in the tournament? Sure, but I want Crocs to look for any balls in the woods. Nancy leisurely walked back to the hotel. As she went through the lobby, a sudden thought occurred to her. After giving a brief explanation, she asked the desk clerk if she might look at the registration cards of recent guests. Certainly, Miss Drew. Love to be of help at any time. Oh, certainly be of help. Nancy flipped the file until she came to the name Martin Bartescu. Studied the man's handwriting. It's not a bit like his signature on my card, she reflected. Nancy was so absorbed in looking at it that she failed to observe the man himself and come up directly behind her. So creepy. Pausing, he regarded her intently for a moment, then dodged into a telephone booth. Nancy, unaware of his presence, went upstairs. Bess and George were dressing for dinner. They were not too occupied, though, to bombard Nancy with questions concerning the haunted bridge. I didn't learn much more except that the ghost walks across the bridge. No, only at night, but also in the daytime. Bess gave a nervous giggle. They'll never let Piper go into that woods. He would have to take 10 iron shots on the fairway. Nancy and George laughed. Then Nancy said, here's a new mystery. Fortescue uses at least two different styles of handwriting. She told about the registration cards. And probably several aliases, George commented full of disgust. Anyway, hereafter I'm going to call him Barty. Barty the Bargain, Beth said. That evening, Mr. Drew had dinner with the girls. Nancy noticed that her tall, handsome father seemed a bit preoccupied. Isn't your case progressing well, Dad? She asked. Not so far, he replied. I probably need your help soon, Nancy. I'll be ready. After dinner, Mr. Drew told the girls that he must leave the hotel for a few hours. We'll manage to amuse ourselves, Beth said, chuckling. The hotel orchestra was an excellent one. The girls met many attractive young men who were vacationing at Deer Mountain. Nancy, Bess, and George were never at a loss for partners. Varsity was persistent and danced with Nancy several times. Though he was an excellent dancer, Nancy did not enjoy being with him. At the end of one number, he firmly steered her toward the terrace. She was annoyed, but told herself this might be a chance to find out more about the man. He launched into a story of his adventures in England, but at the first opportunity, Nancy led him on to the subject that was uppermost in her mind. Honestly, golf is one of your main interests, Mr. Barsky. Do you also have other interests? Oh, yes, he replied. I enjoy tennis, but what are some of yours? Well, for one thing, graphology intrigues me. Some people profess to be able to tell a person's character by meanings of his handwriting. In the semi-darkness, she did not notice her companion regarding her shrewdly as he answered, what an interesting story could be built up around mine. The way I write varies with my moods. Today your charm had me so baffled, I could hardly sign my name at all. I doubt that I would even recognize it on your scorecard. Nancy glanced quickly at the man, but his face was a mask. Unexpectedly, he began to move closer. Nancy, you are very attractive. In all my life, I've never met anyone that I. Nancy took a step back. She did not realize that she had been standing near the edge of the terrace. Suddenly, her heels were no longer on solid cement, and she felt herself falling. She gave a cry of alarm. Before Barsku could extend a hand to save her, she toppled into a flower bed. Oh, I'm sorry, he said. Are you hurt? He asked anxiously, springing down to assist her. Nancy slowly rose from the ground, trying to brush the dirt from her long dress. I think I've sprained my hand, she admitted. Shall I call a doctor? Barberskew asked. No, you'll be all right. Just leave me here. Nancy's outcry had brought several dancers running from the hotel ballroom. The situation was intensely embarrassing to her. She did not wish to explain that her fall from the terrace had been caused by trying to avoid Barbersku's unwelcome attention. He's not very good at reading cues. A little bit of a red flag. You have to let me see your hand, Barsku urged. I don't believe the sprain is a bad one. Nancy ignored him. Walking away swiftly, she went directly to her room. The pain in her left hand was not so intense now, but the fingers were becoming stiff. I'll never be able to play in the tournament, she thought miserably. While Nancy was in the bathroom running cold water on her hand, St. George came hurrying into the back room. Oh, Nancy, Bess wailed. We just heard about your accident. Artie said you weren't hurt, but you are. Let me see the injury, Nancy, George demanded. There's nothing to see. The skin isn't even broken, but my hand still hurts. You must go to a doctor, George urged. At that moment, Carson Drew returned to the hotel and came straight to his daughter's room. Upon hearing about the injury, he too became concerned, particularly when Nancy admitted that her back had been twisted. Now, don't be foolish, he said severely. I'm going to have the house physician come up. Dr. Ackerman was a quiet, dignified man who had little to say. The few words he spoke after his examination were directly to the point. This sprain isn't serious, but you must give your hand a rest. I'll bind it for you and don't use this hand for 3 or 4 days. You mean I can't play any golf? No golf. But doctor, Nancy pleaded. But doctor. It really doesn't hurt very much, and the tournament starts day after tomorrow. Uh, Chapter Chapter 3, Nancy's Assignment. Nancy stands a very good chance of participating in the tournament, Bess told the doctor. It would be a shame if she couldn't play. Well, he said finally after studying Nancy with twinkling eyes, I suppose you could play, but right now I advise against it. However, by tomorrow night I may alter my opinion. Dr. Ackerman picked up his physician's bag. Nancy, I suggest a hot bath and a body massage to prevent your muscles from becoming stiff. The idea rather appealed to Nancy, who felt battered and sore. Why can't that be what the doctors order these days? You know? After the doctor had gone, George spoke up. Bess and I could give you a good rub. Nancy regarded her dubiously. There's absolutely nothing to it, Mace put in. You locate the various muscles and then rub until the surface is all gone. Nancy allowed herself to be persuaded. After the hot bath, she stretched herself full length on the bed. Where do you hurt the most? George inquired. Everywhere, Nancy groaned. Oh, don't rub in that spot, please, George. It's too tender. I have to massage the muscles for friend existence. Where did you get that bottle of liniment? Nancy demanded. It smells awful. It's a free massage, so don't be so critical. Beth relieved George when the latter's arms grew weary of the task. There was no rest or relaxation for Nancy. She was pummeled and pounded by her well-meaning but inexperienced masseuses until she felt ready to cry from sheer exhaustion. Oh, girls, I can't stand any more, she pleaded finally. Just let me crawl under the covers and go to sleep. Isn't she already in bed? But okay. We're through now anyway, Bess declared as she helped Nancy roll over on her back again. In the morning you'll feel fine. I hope so. Nancy closed her eyes. Before George could snap out the light, the telephone rang. Bess answered the call. It's for you, Nancy. Long distance. I wonder who it can be. I hope nothing is wrong at home, Nancy said anxiously, as she painfully pulled herself to a sitting position and took the phone. A familiar voice at the end of the line said cheerily, Hello, Nancy. This is Ned. Can you hear me? Perfectly. Hi. Your voice doesn't sound natural, Ned Nickerson remarked. I guess I shouldn't have bothered you so late at night, but I thought maybe you weren't having a very exciting time and would like to hear from an old friend, meaning me. Oh, Ned, I love hearing from you, but you're entirely wrong about there being no excitement at Deer Mountain. Okay, this girl. She be living for the excitement. She's an adrenaline junkie. Okay. She told him about the haunted bridge, her unpleasant experience with Martin Barskew, and finally of the accident. I'd like to give that guy a going over. He won't forget, Ned replied angrily. You can't very well do it by long distance, Nancy laughed. No, but you may be seeing me sooner than you expect. I thought if you were planning to stay at the hotel for several days, I might drive up with a couple of buddies. Meaning Bert and Dave, Nancy asked. Yes. Terrific, Ned. And before you come, will you do me a special favor? Would you look at the social register and see if Martin Barkskew is listed? Say, I hope you're not getting interested in the now, don't be alarmed, Ned, Nancy interrupted. After explaining the situation, she hung up and told Beth and George the good news. In the morning, Nancy awoke feeling greatly refreshed. Her back was not so sore as she had expected, though her hands still hurt. She needed her friend's assistance to dress and had just slipped on her shoes when a telephone call came from Mr. Drew. How would you like to take a ride with me this morning? That is, if you feel all right. Of course, I'm much better, Nancy answered promptly. Intuition told her that the ride might have something to do with her father's mysterious case. The girls will be down to breakfast in 5 minutes. They were about to leave their rooms when a porter appeared with a box of flowers for Nancy. She assumed that her father had sent them, as Nancy tore away the tissue paper from a dozen red roses in a container. A card dropped to the floor. She picked it up. Martin Fortescue, Nancy exclaimed as she read the name. She left the flowers in the box and walked away. Wait a minute, Bess cried out. Even if you don't like the man, don't punish the poor flowers. She rescued the roses and got water for them in the bathroom. I've never seen a more attractive arrangement. They are pretty, Nancy admitted reluctantly. I suppose he sent them because he feels responsible for my falling off the terrace. Wear one of the roses down to breakfast, Bess suggested. I'd rather not, but you girls are welcome to them. No, Dick, said George. I don't like that man. You better than you do. I don't either, Bess. Hey, girl support. Nancy looked at Barteskew's card once more. Turning it over, she saw that he had written a brief note of sympathy on the girls, look at this handwriting, she called. It's different from the signature on your scorecard, Bess observed, and from the one on the hotel registration card, Nancy told her. George remarked, I can't help but feel there's something suspicious about Martin Bartescue. Knowing that her father was waiting for her in the lobby, Nancy dropped the card into her purse without further comment. The three girls hurriedly locked their doors and went downstairs. Directly after breakfast, Nancy and Mr. Drew drove away. Bess and George decided to play tennis and do some laughing. When the Drews were riding along, the lawyer revealed to his daughter that for the past week he had been working on the legal angles of a special big case involving an international ring of jewel thieves. Detectives. For many months, the customs authorities have been trying to round up the gang. Now the word has spread all over the country. It's believed that one of the members is a woman who frequents the summer resort hotels in this particular area. Unfortunately, no description of her is available. Then how can you hope to trace her, Dad? There is one good clue. What is that? Detectives have learned that the woman carries an expensive jeweled compact set of diamonds and precious stones. In the case is a small picture of a child. Her own child? I don't know, Nancy. There is very little information about this one. And you say she frequents the better hotels near here? Yes. For days, a common detective who works with me has been making rooms for Miss Ankle has been taking curious what about what she sees. How would you like to take Miss Eagle's place until she's fine again? I love it, Nancy cried confidently. When do I start work? This morning, her father replied with a smile as he turned the car into a curving side road. It led toward an imposing hotel at the top of the hill. Mr. Drew parked his car in the grounds of the hotel. As he walked slowly toward the entrance with his daughter, he explained what he wished her to do. Your work is very simple, Nancy. While I interview the hotel clerk, you are to wander about the lobby. Observe the woman who passed through to see if any seems to act suspiciously or happen to pull out a card similar to the one I described. She might be a member of the gang of jewel thieves. And also look in the powder room, Nancy promised. A woman naturally would make use of her phone there. At the hotel entrance, Parson Drew said, we'll separate now. Meet you in half an hour at the club. The lobby was fairly crowded, so Nancy did no particular attention as she seated herself near the elevator. Here she could see everyone who entered and left by the front door. Presently satisfied that the woman she sought was now on the main floor, Nancy went upstairs to look in the ladies' lounge. She saw several women take compacts from their bags, but none of the containers was jeweled. The chimes of a clock warned Nancy that she must return to the car to meet her father. I shouldn't keep him waiting. No luck? Mr. Drew inquired, noting her unhappy expression. Absolutely none. Well, we're only beginning our search, he remarked cheerfully, starting the engine. An investigator's work is always tedious. A short time later, the lawyer drove the car into the grounds of Hemlock Hall, a hotel even larger and more exclusive than Lincoln. See you in half an hour. In the crowded lobby, Nancy soon lost sight of her father. She became completely absorbed in her task of studying the woman gaze. Nancy was a bit dismayed when she glanced at her wristwatch. She must hurry if she were not to be late, meeting her father. I'll check out the powder room before I rejoin Dad, she said to herself. The place was deserted except for a maid, an attractive looking woman in her early 20s. Nancy gazed at the latter intently and immediately noted the sad expression on her face. She can't be the person I'm after, Nancy thought, and made a pretense of combing her hair before the mirror. Her eyes were not upon her own reflection, but focused on the woman who sat nearby. The next moment Nancy nearly dropped her comb. She saw the stranger open her handbag and take out a beautiful compact set with sparkling gems. For her. Chapter 4. A Weird Sight. Nancy's heart beat with excitement. She had found the person for whom. Had she found the person for whom her father was searching? The woman raised her eyes, blushing slightly as she became aware of Nancy's stare. I don't mean to be rude, the young detective said, but I couldn't help admiring your beautiful compact. I've never seen one like it. The stranger graciously handed it to Nancy for closer inspection. With trembling fingers, the young detective unfastened the catch. Would the case contain the picture of a child? With mingled feelings of relief and disappointment, Nancy saw that the inside of the cover held only a mirror. After a few admiring comments, she returned the case and asked the woman if she were a guest at the hotel. No, I'm not, the other admitted. I came to have lunch with a friend. Are you spending your vacation here? Nancy shook her head. "I'm staying at Deer Mountain Hotel." Lovely place, the young woman remarked. She paused as she powdered her face and went on. I formerly lived only a short distance from there. My home was destroyed by a fire. Before Nancy could inquire about the exact location of the house or the stranger's name, the woman rose. After replacing the compact in her bag, she left the room. Nancy was tempted to follow her, but could think of no pretext for reopening the conversation. She returned to the car and found her father waiting for her. You're late, Nancy. We won't have time to visit another hotel. I must get back to Deer Mountain for an important interview. I'm sorry I took so long, Dad. I thought I had located the woman you're looking for. Nancy gave a detailed description of the jeweled compact which had attracted her attention and related the conversation with the young woman. Every clue is worth investigating, Mr. Drew assured Nancy. And it's possible this woman may not be so innocent as she seems. At Deer Mountain Hotel, father and daughter had a quick lunch at the grill, then parted. Nancy found her friends resting in the room after several hours of vigorous exercise playing tennis. You were gone such a long while. We began to wonder what had happened to you, George said as Nancy threw herself down in an understuffed chair and into an overstuffed like window. Time. Oh, a little, and my hand is hurting me again. Golf scores have been coming in all day, as reported, but the last we heard you were still in the upper group. There seems to be a lot of gossip in the hotel about your friend Barney, George remarked. One of the golf players, the former state champ, practically accused him of cheating. Bess put in teasingly. While you were away, Nancy, he telephoned twice. We told him you'd be back about 2 o'clock. It's Nancy sighed. It's after that now, so he'll probably be calling again. I don't want to talk to him. Let's go for a walk to the woods near the 16th fairway. I like to visit the haunted bridge. At once, Bess objected. Oh, we shouldn't go there alone, she murmured nervously. Now, don't be silly, George chided her cousin. You know very well there are no ghosts. It's only a story, of course. Stories seldom originate out of nothing, Bess retorted quickly. I know we'll get into trouble. Nancy and George promised they would be careful. Reluctantly, Bess followed them out of the room. By the time the girls reached the woods, Bess began to lose her fear and to share their zest for the adventure. The bridge is down by the ravine, remember? Nancy said. I can see something white among the trees, George replied. Maybe it's the ghost, Bess explained. Nancy and George pushed off through the dense tangle of underbrush, with Bess bringing up the rear. They were close enough now to see the footbridge. It was old and in need of repairs. Nancy, who was in the lead, halted above. Through the trees, she could see something white flapping. The next moment, a moaning and a weird groaning filled the air. Bess gasped in horror. The bridge is haunted, she cried. You can see the ghost waving its arms. Nancy, let's get out of here. Nonsense, said George. It's probably only a piece of white cloth fluttering in the wind. It might be, Bess admitted, but did you ever hear a piece of cloth moan and groan? Nancy started to reply, but the words died in her throat. From somewhere up the ravine to their left came a fearful cry that rose to a screeching crescendo, then faded away with a tremendous wail. What's that? Whispered Bess. Maybe some kind of wild animal, replied George uneasily. Perhaps, Nancy said doubtfully. But what could it be? I don't think there's anything larger than deer in these woods. For several minutes, the three girls huddled together, listening for the weird sounds veered through the screen of trees. They could still see the white ghost-like object moving its arms slowly to and fro. Come on, Nancy urged. We'll approach quietly and see if we can surprise the ghost. Bess pleaded with her companions to give up the adventure, but they paid no attention. Nancy, who was ahead of the others, moved stealthily forward through the woods, taking care not to step on twigs nor to make any sound which would betray her presence. Suddenly she halted and began to laugh. Girls, Chris so called ghost is nothing but an old scarecrow. Moving slightly aside, Nancy pointed toward the bridge directly below. The girls were now close enough to see a tall, tattered white figure flapping in the breeze. That was a good joke on us, George grinned. No longer afraid, they hastened down into the ravine to examine the scarecrow. It had been set up at the entrance to the narrow rustic footbridge that spanned the creek. Evidently, the figure had been standing there for many months, because the white clothing was grimy and torn, and straw stuffing protruded from the shirt. The scarecrow is so wild, said George, that the slightest breeze or any vibration of the bridge causes it to move. Seeing the movement from a distance, I suppose the caddies imagined the figure was crossing the bridge, Nancy added. Well, I guess the mystery of the haunted bridge is solved, concluded George. How do you explain the moaning and the groaning we heard? Bess asked. Did we imagine it? No, Nancy asked gravely. These noises were very real, and so was that terrible cry up the ravine. And we know none of them came from this scarecrow. You don't suppose we heard the creaking of the bridge as it swayed in the wind? Bess asked. No, Nancy replied. It's possible some prankster may be at work around here. Let's make a search. After the girls had investigated the area carefully, they were more bewildered than before. There was no evidence of footprints in the vicinity of the bridge. Apparently, no one had been there recently. Nobody's around here now, Nancy observed. But of course, someone must have set up the scarecrow. But why? There are no fruit trees nearby and no crops to be protected from crows, Bess commented. It seems pretty obvious that someone wants to keep people from crossing the bridge. Shall we go to the other side? Nancy asked. The bridge doesn't look safe to me, Bess protested. I think it will hold me, Nancy said, as she cautiously stepped onto the bridge. Rickety boards creaked. Beth shuddered. "Oh, Nancy, please don't go any farther," she cried. "There's nothing to see on the other side." The young detective, her hands clenched around the wooden railing, edged her way to the middle of the bridge. Beads of perspiration dotted her forehead as the shaky support swayed. Suddenly the railing billowed outward. Bess and George gasped as Nancy paused, then deftly pulled the railing toward her. "Please turn back," Bess called. "Let's look, let's look for your golf ball instead." Nancy did not want to upset her friends and gingerly made her way back to them. "I'd very much like to find that ball," she said. "It's a prize of mine. Jimmy Harlow, the champion of afternoon." The girls walked among the bushes and leaves for nearly 15 minutes, but could not locate the lost ball. "Maybe it rolled into the creek," Beth suggested. Nancy, who wore a pair of sturdy shoes, scrambled down the muddy bank. After a brief search, she realized she was accomplishing nothing and was ruining her shoes. She decided to rejoin her friends who were watching from above. She just she walked along the edge of the creek, looking for a place where the bank was not so steep. Suddenly, her eyes lighted upon a metal object half buried in thick mud. Excitedly, Nancy stooped to pick it up. Chapter 5. Exciting discovery. "Is that your ball, Nancy?" George called. "No, it's a piece of brass. I think I've found an old plate." "A brass plate!" Bess exclaimed in wonder. Meanwhile, Nancy had pried the object out of the mud and saw that it was not a plate, but a small carved chest. "It looks valuable," she gasped, holding up the article for Bess and George to see. "And it's very heavy." "Nancy, you're so lucky," George remarked. "Lose a golf ball and find a treasure chest." "This feels heavy enough to contain gold," Nancy declared, turning the curious object over in her two hands. She estimated that the whole chest was not more than 6 inches in length. It appeared to be approximately 4 inches wide and slightly less than that. "Open it quickly," Bess urged when Nancy rejoined them. "The chest seems to be locked." "Maybe the lid's stuck," George added. "Let me try." She had no better success. "It's locked all right," Bess declared. "We could try to smash the lid with a rock." "Brass isn't easy to crack," Nancy replied. "Besides, I don't want to ruin such an attractive old chest. It will be beautiful when cleaned and polished." "I'm curious to know what's inside," George interjected. "Any ideas, Nancy?" "Maybe something valuable. The thing that interests me is, how did it get here so close to the haunted bridge?" "Perhaps the Scarecrow put it there on his off-duty hours," Bess suggested with a grin. "Ha ha, very funny," her cousin answered. "Sounds like your brain has gone off duty." Bess ignored the comment and remarked, "I'll bet the water washed it down here. The creek evidently was much higher at one time than it is now." "I wonder," said Nancy, "if someone deliberately buried the chest, possibly the person who set up the Scarecrow." "Well, it's too deep a mystery for me," Bess declared, as the girls climbed out of the ravine with their treasure. "Nancy, if you can find the answer to this riddle, you'll be good." "I mean to try at least," the young detective replied with a laugh. The three girls soon emerged from the woods. They met no one as they cut across the golf course. As they approached Deer Mountain Hotel, they saw Martin Barterskew on the terrace. He sat sipping a cool drink under an umbrella at a table. He quickly arose and came toward the girls. Nancy was annoyed. That pest will be certain to see the chest and ask a million questions about it, she. Bess, who was carrying a sweater, carefully tossed it over Nancy's arm, so the object was concealed before Barterskin could speak. Nancy said hastily, "Thank you for the beautiful flowers. You like the roses you made? I ordered the best I could get." "Of course, the flower shop here at Deer Mountain is not like those in New York or Europe. How are you feeling today? Very well, except for my aunt. My finger is still pretty useless, Nancy replied. Do you plan to play in the tournament? Yes, if the doctor says I may, and providing I qualify. Spartacus smiled. Spartacus smiled. Your score was one of the lowest turned in. You qualified. I was hoping to, she said. Are you competing in the men's tournament tomorrow? Oh, yes, and I'm counting on winning the cup, Darcy announced. I went out for a practice round this morning and shot a 69. I'm just coming into my game, he boasted. I doubt if anyone here will be a match for me unless I go into an athletics slum. The girls found his bearing decidedly distasteful, but listened politely. May I treat you to ice cream? He said as the four reached the hotel entrance. He seemed offended when Nancy declined. When the girls gained the privacy of their adjoining bedrooms, Bess chuckled. At least he didn't see the brass chest. Nancy immediately tried to pry open the chest with a nail file, but the lid would not budge. "We need something with a sharp point," George declared as she started the chest. "If only we had an ice pick or something with a—" Nancy sprang to her feet, her eyes full of excitement. "Why didn't I think of it before?" Without waiting to explain, she dropped the chest into George's lap and ran from the room. She hurried through the hotel lobby to find a tool with which to pry open the lid. As Nancy passed the flower shop, she paused a moment to admire the beautiful display in the window. "It would be nice for me to send George and Bess each bouquet," she mused. "They admired mine so much. They should have some of their own." She grinned. Impulsively, Nancy entered the shop where she purchased two bouquets to be delivered immediately to her friends. "Shall I include your name?" the clerk inquired. "No, just write from a friend." Nancy knew that Bess and George would recognize her handwriting and thought it would be fun to tease them. She watched as the clerk wrote the message on two cards. Nancy picked up one and looked at it curiously. "Your handwriting looks familiar," she said. "I sometimes write cards for my customers. Did someone send you flowers from my shop?" "Yes, I received a dozen roses from a man named Martin Barsview." "Oh, are you Miss Drew?" "Yes, I am. I wrote the card that went with your flowers," the clerk recalled. "Mr. Barsview pressed me to do so." "I see," Nancy murmured, without disclosing by her tone that the information had special significance. She paid for the flowers and left. As she passed the registration desk, the hotel clerk motioned to her. "Miss Drew, the tournament chairman, asked me to give you this," she said, and handed her a sealed envelope. To her delight, it contained an invitation to enter the official competition. Excitedly, Nancy hurried on to the caddy house, where her golf bag and spike shoes were. Bess and George were mystified when their friend returned to the cousins' room, holding the shoes in an envelope. "Sharp dear, Bess, what do you intend to do with those?" Nancy laughed. "Could you ask for a better implement than a spike?" Almost in the same breath, she asked, "Aren't you curious about this too?" She showed them the letter and then turned her attention to the brass checks. Holding it firmly between her knees, she inserted a row of the spikes of one shoe under the edge of the lid and used the other shoe as a hammer. As she paused for a moment, Nancy remarked, "The lid on this mystery chest is stubborn." Beth said, "Why don't you stop for a while? It's almost dinner time. We should dress." Reluctantly, Nancy agreed. The girls had just finished changing when a boy appeared at the door bearing two boxes from the florist shop. "They're for Nancy, of course," sighed Miss Artie is a pest, but at least he's generous. George looked at one of the boxes. "This is addressed to me," she cried in surprise. "There must be some mistake." Nancy thoroughly enjoyed herself as she watched the two girls open their boxes. So far, they did not suspect that she had sent the flowers. "Oh, what a lovely bouquet!" Beth exclaimed in delight, putting her face close to the yellow roses in it. "Who could have sent it?" George was peering at the attached card. "From a friend," she read. "And mine is the same," Beth added. "Are you sure you haven't been hiding something from me?" Nancy asked eagerly. The little game went on for some time. Then Nancy's broad smile betrayed her. Nancy Drew, you sent these flowers, Beth suddenly accused her. Well, yes, I did. It was great of you to do this, Nancy, Beth declared. George thanked her, saying it was a sweet joke, the kind she liked. I did myself a good turn by visiting the forest. I found something interesting about Barney. Here is a picture of Nancy George of the chest. Nancy explained that the girl in the flower shop had written the note which accompanied her post. Barney seems to be afraid someone will recognize his handwriting. Bess remarked, do you suppose he's a fugitive? He seems to have plenty of money and apparently doesn't work, Nancy replied. Still, it never occurred to me that he might be a criminal. Why don't you wear one of Barty's flowers, Nancy? Beth suggested. It would set off your dress beautifully. But I don't like him, Nancy protested. Oh, probably he won't even be in the dining room. Flowers are flowers, Nancy. Here, let me pin a rose on you, George insisted. Nancy finally gave in. She hid the chest under the bed, and the girls left their rooms, each wearing a rose. Since Mr. Drew had not returned to the hotel, the girls planned alone. They were led by the head waiter to a pleasant table near a window. Oh, there's Barty, Nancy murmured to George as she noticed him seated alone at a table nearby. Don't let you see him. It was impossible to avoid the man, because he immediately got up and came over to them. When he saw that Nancy was wearing one of his roses, the glance he bestowed on her was more than just friendly. May I join you? He asked. Then, without waiting for a reply, he seated himself in an empty chair beside Nancy. During dinner, Barstow enjoyed himself thoroughly. He eyed him over his food as he recounted his fantastic tours in Africa. Nancy suspected that he had never been there. Finally, the meal came to an end. With feelings of relief, the girls left the dining room. Artiscu followed. Of course, you're staying downstairs for the dancing, he said to Nancy. No, I must see the doctor. He's going to examine my hand again and give his verdict on whether or not I can play in the tournament. You are very courageous. Few players would attempt it with such an injury. Nancy made no comment. She gave a polite smile of farewell and moved away. As Dr. Akerman examined her injured hand, the three girls waited in anxious silence. He asked Nancy a question or two regarding the pain. Only one finger is stiff now, she replied. Please say I can play. I gave myself a little dress. Chapter 6 The Caddy's Clue. Well, young lady, Dr. Ackerman said to Nancy, I see you've set your heart on playing. Yes. Okay, I permit you to play on one condition. You must not lose. Nancy frowned and said, how could she hope to make a low score with one hand bandaged? I agree, she replied reluctantly. And another thing the doctor added, if your hand begins paining after you start to play, you must default the match. Otherwise, I won't be responsible for your case. I promise, Nancy murmured. Okay, that's actually like a really good point. Hey, just so you know, if you injure yourself, I'm not at fault here. I'm warning you right now that you shouldn't do that. The girls were rather subdued as they went to their rooms. I don't think you should try to play in the tournament, Bess declared. If you don't participate, people will realize it's because of your injured hand. It's no disgrace to default. But I want to play, Nancy replied. My mind is made up. Then George said, if you're determined to do it, the best thing is to go to bed and get all the rest you can. I have work to do before I go to sleep, Nancy announced. With a nod, she indicated the carved brass chest under the bed. Let Bess and me try to open it, George urged. Here, give me that spiked shoe, Nancy. You're apt to hurt your hand again. Eagerly, the cousins took turns prying at the stubborn lid of the mysterious chest. Finally, Bess exclaimed, It's loosening! Yes, it's coming! Nancy, you should have the honor of opening the chest. It may be filled with worthless things, Nancy laughed. But her hand trembled with excitement as she slowly raised the lid. The girls stared into the interior, their eyes fastened upon and remained in contents. Nancy was the first to recover from her astonishment. It's almost unbelievable, she murmured in a half whisper. I never dreamed that the chest contained anything like this. The carved brass case was filled to the top with jewelry. Even a casual glance assured Nancy and her friends that the pieces were genuine. There were necklaces of rubies, emeralds, and turquoise, also rings with unusual settings, and many other gold and silver pieces. All this must be worth a fortune, Bess murmured. Nancy, you'll be rich. The jewelry isn't mine, just because I found it. But the owner may never be located, George said hopefully as she lifted a silver bracelet from the chest. Isn't this gorgeous? Nancy was attracted by an emerald necklace, but as she started to lift it from the chest, she saw an object beneath it which was of far greater interest to her. The article was a jeweled compact. Eagerly, she picked up the gleaming container and opened it. A tiny picture was fitted into the lower half of the mirror. As Nancy showed it to her friends, Bess declared, It's the photo of a child. Evidently, it was ruined by water, George observed. This looks like the picture of a little girl. George and Bess could not imagine why Nancy should consider the discovery so important. She was tempted to tell them of her father's search for the possessor of just such an article, or recalling that the secret was not hers to reveal, she remained silent. Nancy, you don't seem pleased over all this treasure, Bess remarked as she and George continued to examine the beautiful pieces. I was just thinking, Nancy answered absently. I must show Dad the chest as soon as he returns to the hotel. Shortly after 11 o'clock, the girls heard Mr. Drew enter his room directly across the hall. Nancy lost no time in showing her father the carved bronze chest. She threw open the lid, enjoying his look of amazement as he beheld the dazzling display of gems. Nancy, have you read the jewelry store? He teased. His daughter laughed and explained briefly how the chest had come into her possession. She climaxed the silent story by thrusting the jewel compact into his hand. Dad, could this be the article you've been trying to trace? Percy Drew carefully examined the gleaming object. It certainly fits the description, and there's no question about the quality of the jewelry. I think we should still get it checked out. Dad, the chest may have been hidden by a member of a gang of thieves. Yes, that's very possible. This discovery may change all of our plans. And to complicate them, it will be harder to track down the mysterious woman, since she won't be carrying the telltale compact. Percy Drew gave a sigh and suppressed a yawn. He said, If this compact belongs to her, yes. We have no other clue. Suppose I keep this jewelry in my possession until I communicate with New York City detectives. I'll telephone Mandy and give a description of every piece in the chest. Possibly they can identify the jewelry as stolen property. Before saying goodnight, Nancy told her father that she was scheduled to play in the first round of the golf tournament the following day. Then she kissed him and went off to bed. 9 o'clock the next morning, Nancy was waiting at the first tee for Miss Amy Gray, whose name had been drawn with her own for the initial match. Bess and George were on hand to see their friend's first drive. They had decided against her over the course, fearing that their presence might prove distracting.
Nancy had arranged for Chris to caddy for her. He smiled encouragingly as she took a few practice swings. How does your hand feel? George inquired. Oh, fine, Nancy answered. Amy Gray, about 30 and slightly plump, soon arrived with her caddy. She drew a ball. She drove the ball, which sped 200 yards straight down the fairway. Finally, Nancy stepped to the tee and sent her own ball within a few feet of that of her opponent. Bess and George were delighted at the beautiful shot. From the first tee, they watched the hole and were almost certain that Nancy had won by a stroke. She's starting off pretty well, even if her hand does bother her, Bess declared gleefully. Amy Gray was an able player and did not waste strokes. She took the second hole and the third, leaving Nancy on the defensive. After that, it was a grim fight, with first one player having an advantage, then the other. Finally, shot a ball into the rim around the 15th fairway. Nancy knew that she herself would win the match. You're playing a beautiful game, congratulated her. I'm afraid my fastball will be as low as I'd like, Nancy replied. That is, not unless I make pars on the last three holes. Number 16 isn't my favorite either. She smiled significantly at Chris, who averted his eyes in embarrassment. He was still ashamed because he had refused to search for her last bump in the haunted church. I would have been like, he's embarrassed because he's like, uh, hi, Hepcat, 15 Cat. Thanks for listening. I know I love Nancy Drew. We are going to in Nancy history, a golf tournament at the Deer Mountain Hotel that her and her friends and Kirsten Drew are staying. You're playing a beautiful game, and congratulated her. I think the score won't be lower than right. And last time I played the last holes. 16 is not my favorite. She smiled significantly at Chris, who averted his eyes in embarrassment. He was still ashamed because he had refused to search for her last ball near the haunted bridge. Nancy sent a long ball flying down the fairway and was glad it did not enter the woods. As she walked along her caddy, she told him she had investigated the movie. Your bridge has a ghost, Chris, but I've seen the thing moving about, the boy said defensively. What you saw through the trees was a white scarecrow. A scarecrow? Well, that's a good joke on me and the other guys. We were sure it was a ghost because we could hear that thing screaming. How do you explain that? I can't yet, Chris, said Nancy. I'm sure that the screams are being supernatural. The boy looked doubtful. I'm sorry I wouldn't look for your lost ball the other day, he apologized. If I were sure you're right about the ghosts, I'd search for it later. Nancy smiled amusement because she saw that Chris was torn by conflicting emotions. He wanted to find the both boys, but he could not sense the fear he felt while looking for them. Nancy said, I'd especially like to recover that ball because it was autographed by Jimmy Farley. Wow, no wonder you want to get it back, Chris murmured. Oh, look for it. Have you always looked to Nancy asked him as they were working together toward the last ball. Sure, Chris grinned. Well alive. Then you must know nearly everyone for miles around. Tell me, did you ever hear of a house near the hotel that burned recently? The caddy looked slightly puzzled a moment, then smiled. Oh, you must mean the Judson mansion. It stood over there. With a sweep of his arm, Chris pointed back toward the woods. He said, it was kind of close to the bridge on the other side of the ravine. It burned more than 2 years ago in the middle of the night. No one knew how the fire started. You say a family named Judson lived in the house? Not a family, only Miss Margaret Judson. And is she an old lady? Nancy inquired. Oh no, she'd be about 23 or 4 now. Her parents died. She was engaged to marry some guy, a professor at a college near here, but they never did get married. After the fire, she ran away, and no one heard much about her after that. Interesting. It was odd that she disappeared directly after the fire, answered Bert. Yes, but the Judsons were strange. My mother could tell you a lot more about the family. Nancy was elated. This was the first tangible clue she had had to identify the young woman with whom she had talked that Henry Hall. Would Chris's mother be able to tell her more regarding Margaret Judson? Facts, perhaps, which would connect her with the brass chest discovered near her former home. Where do you and your mother live? Nancy asked the caddy. Chris gave her his address and Nancy wrote it down. I'll go to see her. It's like, hey, I keep laughing because my brother's name is feeling like I'm talking about my brother and my mom because it's true. Chapter 7. Okay, Chapter 7. Ravine Riddle. Nancy played brilliantly on the 18th hole. Her hand had not pained her. Oh, happy 15 cat. Nancy did get injured, and so she's playing with an injured hand. Fortunately, the bandage had not hampered the young golfer in driving the ball or using the putter to tap it into the cup. Bess and George were waiting at the 18th when Nancy and her opponent ended the round. They approached their friend the instant Amy Gray was out of hearing and congratulated Nancy on winning the match. We knew you'd do it, Bess declared. Tomorrow you'll take the second round, and then you'll do well on your way to the championship. It won't be easy, Nancy replied. The second match is always harder than the first because you're facing a better player. How was your score? George asked. Not very good. I came in with an 80. I must get down into the low 70s or under to win. You can do it, Nancy, Beth said confidently. How about lunch, girls? Great, Nancy agreed. If we have it early, maybe we won't run into Barney. The three girls were relieved to find the hotel dining room practically deserted. After enjoying a leisurely meal, they wandered out of doors. Nancy's gaze roved toward the 16th fairway. You're not considering more golf. Golf? George asked in surprise. Nancy shook her head. 18 holes is enough for me today. Chris was telling me about an old match a couple of years ago. Miss Margaret Judson, the owner, lived there. Place is over in the general direction of the bridge. Let's hike to it, she chuckled. Maybe we'll find another lost treasure. Though the idea of the trek did not appeal to Beth, she endured to accompany Nancy. The three were cutting across the fairway of the 18th hole when they encountered Bart. Hello, he called. Where are you going? On a little hike, Nancy replied as he fell into step with them. He said quickly, I have a little time to kill before I play my match this afternoon. I doubt if we'll be back very soon, Nancy said pointedly. You might miss your match if you come along. In other words, no gentleman wanted to pursue. Oh well, I was only teasing. I couldn't have gone anyway because I tee up at 1:30. With a wide knowing grin. Do you think Barry suspects we have a special search instead of their telephone figure? He acted as if he does, Nancy said. Glancing over their shoulders to make certain they were not being watched, the girls cut through the woods. They approached the old wooden bridge cautiously. The scarecrow is waving its arms back and forth as usual, Bess observed nervously as they glimpsed it through the trees. I have a strong hunch that we're walking straight into trouble. George laughed at Bess's face. Don't be negative, George said. Nancy looked up down the street. This is probably the only place near here to cross the street, she said. I think the bridge should bear our weight if we walk over one at a time. The young detective winced. After she safely reached the opposite side, George followed. Bess came last, uttering a muffled little shriek as the flapping scarecrow brushed her home. Shh! Shh! Nancy warned. You so deep. It's great too without being wrapped itself around. Beth reported to interrupt. Nancy, I don't see how you expect to find the burnt mansion when you don't know the way. She ducked to avoid being scratched by a low-hanging thorny branch. Did Chris say it was on this side of the bridge? Nancy replied. He pointed toward the left in this general direction. I think we're heading right. I see a trail. Nancy indicated a faintly outlined path directly ahead. When the girls reached it, they were puzzled to find still another trail branching away from the ravine. Which shall we take? Bess asked as Nancy hesitated. It looks as if the one that follows along the edge of the ravine might have been used recently. Yes, so probably the other one. Anyway, let's try it, Nancy suggested. She pushed forward again, the scraggly bushes tearing at her clothing. Bess and George followed as best they could. Presently, the trio came to a clearing close by a high fence. Thank goodness for that jungle at last, Bess sighed where she leaned against a tree to rest. Do you suppose this is the estate? The young detective craned her neck. Yes, I can see something directly above that looks like part of a building. This must have been a beautiful place when it was kept up. The grounds covered about 5 acres and were wooded with giant oak and willow trees. What probably had been a lush green lawn was choked with weeds, but the vestiges of a rose garden remained. There was a huge pile of debris in the very center of the clearing, a charred pit, and several half roasted. Little else remained of the pretentious mansion. Is this what we've come to see? Prince asked in disgust. What did you expect that some genie had restored the house, George? Nancy said nothing. It did not have on occurred to her that Joseph's would have been so devastating. She had hoped to try to give the fruit, such as a photograph, to connect some member of the family. Observing Nancy's look of disappointment, her friend really but she had not told them everything. Do you know anything more about Miss Judson? Asked Pearson. Chris told me that she's a young woman who has had a tragic life. I don't see how you hope to connect her with the press chest, George remarked. Nancy smiled. I'm afraid I can't tell you anything more until Dad gives me permission. I can see there's nothing to find here. So let's start back to the hotel. Bess and George did not urge their friend to reveal her secret because of her promise to her father. Few words were exchanged as the three friends made their way laboriously back to the ravine. Nancy was absorbed with her own thoughts. Could Margaret Judson be a member of an international gang of jewel thieves? No, not if I'm any judge of character. She just didn't look the type, Nancy reflected. Her thoughts were interrupted as a shrill scream broke the stillness. The three girls stopped abruptly. There it is again, Bess murmured apprehensively, clutching Nancy's hand. That awful scream! The girls waited a moment listening, but the noise was not repeated. I'd certainly like to find out who or what is making that sound, said Nancy. I'm not sure I would, said George. It's all part of the ravine mystery, Nancy remarked. But how does it figure in? The girls went on. Presently they reached the dividing point of the two trails. Nancy's gaze roved down the path along the route. I think the sound came from that direction, she said firmly. Let's investigate. Not me, Bess cried, grasping Nancy's arm. I've had enough adventure for one day. Nancy's protests were overwhelmed, and she was fairly pulled along toward the haunted bridge. One at a time, the girls crossed it and retracted their steps toward the golf course. To keep out of the way of players who might be coming down the fairway, Nancy and her friends walked within the fringe of woods. Now and then they could hear voices and knew that a match was being played somewhere nearby. Suddenly, an object came whizzing through the air, striking a tree not more than a dozen yards from where the girls were walking. As a golf ball landed squarely behind another tree. Someone will have a mean shot to play, Nancy remarked. Let's duck out of sight and watch. The girls had just hidden behind some trees when Martin Fortescue entered the woods. He was muttering to himself, softly grating his lip. The man hunted him up the shrubbery for a few moments and finally came upon his foe. Never mind, Caddy, the girls heard him shout. I found it. Satisfied that no one was watching, he took an iron club and deftly raked the ball from the hollow spot in which it had lodged. Now, with it flying an unobstructed path to the fairway, he played a clean shot out of the woods. Did you see that? Nancy whispered in great disgust. He cheated. Cheater. He's a cheater. Right in chapter 8. Chapter 8. The Gardener's Scare. Someone should report Gray to the golf committee, boasted their neighbor. The nerve of him to move his ball. He ought to be barred from further competition, George added. I agree, Nancy said. When the girls reached the hotel, they found Carson Drew seated on the terrace. After he had chatted with the three for a few minutes, he took Nancy aside and told her that he would have to leave immediately to catch a plane to New York. I'd appreciate your driving me to the airport and keeping my car. I must go because New York detectives have asked me to bring the brass chest and its contents there for examination, he explained. Then I think the jewelry may be stolen property, Nancy asked. Yes, Nancy, keep your eyes open for that woman you encountered at Pembroke Hall. She'll probably be wanted for questioning. All right, Dad, I suspect that her name may be Margaret Johnson, but I have no clue. You've done remarkable work on the case so far, Mr. Drew praised his daughter warmly. While I'm gone, watch out. Remember that the woman we're after is shrewd and dangerous. I'll be careful. In the morning, Nancy learned that her golf match would not be played until later in the day. Good, she said to Beth and George. I'm driving down to the village to call Chris's mother. He said she could tell me more about the Johnsons and their birth club. Chris had told us what to expect Nancy. Mrs. Sutter greeted her cordially. She breathed. She could be a loquacious woman who launched into a long account of her children's achievements and talents. With difficulty, Nancy managed to change the subject and talk about the Johnson family. Oh, yes, Mrs. Sutter said with a nod. Chris was telling me you were interested in them, though I told him I didn't see why anyone would be. They were aloof people, never mixing with their neighbors. Margaret was pretty, but she aged a lot after her parents died. She was engaged to marry a college professor. I don't know what happened. After the fire, she just ran off. I did housework for a woman who knew her man. She told me he was all broken up over it and was married. Why did Margaret run away? Some said it was because she was so upset over her parents' death and then the fire on top of it. Others thought maybe she just wanted to break the engagement and didn't have the courage to tell the police. Isn't any member of the Judson family living in the community now? Oh no, they're all gone. And no one knows what became of Margaret Judson, except perhaps the gardener. Mrs. Sutter did not recall the man's name nor where he lived. I heard that he goes to the Judson place sometimes and cuts the weeds. But I guess he's given up hope that Margaret will ever return. Have you any idea how I can find this gardener, Mrs. Sutter? Not unless you happen to run into him by accident. He doesn't come to town very often, and I don't know anyone who could tell you where he lives. I'd really like to find him, yes. You're pretty interested in the family, aren't you, Mrs. Rhodes? Nancy could see that Mrs. Sutter was overcome with curiosity. I found something near the golf course which I thought might belong to Margaret. That's why I'm trying to trace her. The explanation partially satisfied Mrs. Sutter, and Nancy left before the woman could ask any more questions. On her way to Deer Mountain Hotel, she stopped her car at a service station to get gas. She learned from the attendant that the Judson estate could be reached by a dirt road which ran south of the ravine. I'll drive out there on the chance the gardener may be cutting weeds, Nancy decided. I'll still have time to get back for my golf match. The trip to the Judson estate took a little over half an hour. Nancy left the car by the roadside and walked up Lower Grove Lane to the estate. At first, she thought the place was deserted. Then suddenly she glimpsed a man some distance away. He was cutting weeds with a hand. That's really lucky. As Nancy moved forward eagerly, he looked up. Suddenly he dropped his sickle and started to run in the opposite direction. Wait, Nancy begged him. Please wait. The man paid no attention. He leaped onto a bicycle hidden in the bushes, then rode rapidly down a path and disappeared among the trees. Don't run away, Nancy shouted as she dashed after him. The man glanced over his shoulder and pedaled faster and faster. The surrounding clouds were bare of trees, and shivering, she watched their Why did he act that way? She speculated with a shrug. Nancy turned and walked back to her car. At the hotel, Bess and George were waiting for her on the terrace. Already won his match yesterday, Bess announced as Nancy sat down. George and I happened to see the scorecard. What did he have at number 16? Nancy asked quickly. A 4. Imagine that. You should have been disqualified for cheating, Nancy said. Did you tell the chairman about it? We were going to, but what was the use? George asked. He would deny everything. Yes, that's true, Bess added. Barty was ahead before he came to the 16th hole, George revealed. He didn't need to cheat, for the match already was his. He just couldn't bear to take a penalty. It's disgusting, Nancy murmured. I wonder how the other matches are turning out. Let's watch some of the players. They sauntered along the course, pausing at the 17th green to watch two players hold their putts. Then they moved on toward the woods. Isn't that Chris Sutter? Nancy asked, presently indicating a boy just within the from the trees. He's peering into the woods by the identical place where your ball went in, Bess observed. I tried to convince him that the area wasn't haunted, Nancy said, chuckling. It was obvious that he was still afraid to look for the ball. Finally mastering his misgivings, he disappeared from view. The girls quickened their steps. Just as they reached the woods, Chris reappeared, apparently unsuccessful in his search for the. No luck, Nancy asked him. The boy shook his head. Sorry. By the way, Chris, Nancy said, I'm depending on you to caddy for them today. I'll be ready whenever you say, Miss Drew. Please be at the first tee by 2:30. You'll win, Chris said confidently, and I'll be pulling for you all the way. The girls chatted with Chris for a few minutes. Then leaving him to continue the search for the autographed golf ball, they walked back to the hotel. While passing through the lobby, Nancy saw a letter in her room mailbox. She stopped to ask the clerk for it. Oh, and it's a note from your new admirer, Dustin interviewed. The letter was indeed from Martin Arce. He wished Nancy luck in her afternoon match, so that he had defeated his opponent in the team match. If you win today, we must celebrate our joint victory. I look forward to escorting you to the dance I hope you call. Nancy refused. He takes it for granted that I'd be thrilled to go. Then, calming down, she said, I think perhaps I will accept. Beth and George stared at her in bewilderment. How can you expect to have any fun with him, George? I know, but it'll be a good chance to study the guests if this speech works for them. Oh, that's different, Beth answered Emily. By the way, two boys here at the hotel have asked George and me to the same dance. We haven't promised yet, Beth replied. But if you want to go with Barney, we could accept and all keep together. Good idea, Nancy agreed with them after a moment's thought. And now let's eat lunch. I'll have to leave soon for my lunch. Later, when the girls came from the dining room, the desk clerk signaled to Nancy. He handed her a telegram that had just been delivered. It was from her father and read, Meet me at airport tomorrow at 7. Jewelry and brass chest examined. We must locate only. Immediately, Nancy thought, maybe I'll have some news for Dad. There's a chance I may see Margaret Johnson at Emily Hall tonight. For once, perhaps Barney has done me a favor by inviting me to dance there. It was after 2 o'clock when the girls walked to the first tee. Nancy resolutely put aside all thoughts of the back to a stout, muscular woman not expecting to be twisted out of sleep. Bess whispered to Nancy, This isn't going to be a friendly match. Ruth Ellison is out to win. The two players matched each other stroke for stroke as they played the first 3 holes. Neither seemed to be able to gain the advantage. Nancy was conscious that her had watched every shot like a hawk, as if hoping to catch Nancy breaking one of the rules of the game. Nancy in turn paid careful attention to every move she made. Her hand pained her, but she made no attention of the handicap putter which she was playing. At first, Nancy was able to drive long, straight balls, but gradually her hand became weary and she found herself in difficulty. Ruth Ellison 2 holes in succession. A look of smug satisfaction came over her face. It faded, however, when Nancy, fighting gamely, took the next hole, matching her opponent in the following one, and then won again to even the score. At the 16th tee, the match was still even. Having won the previous hole, Nancy had the honor of driving forward. As she took a backswing with her club, her mind wandered momentarily to the mystery of the jeweled leaf. The result was that her ball sliced wickedly. To the horror of Chris, it entered his. Too bad, Ruth Allison said with a voluptuous upbeat she really loved. Chapter 9. Ruth Allison's remark that Nancy's bad drive might. Oh, Nancy is accused. Chapter 9. Ruth Allison's remark that Nancy's bad drive might put her out of the tournament upset the teenage girl. She tried not to show it. Nancy watched in dismay as her opponent drove a long, straight ball past the spot where hers had gone into the hole. The group walked along in silence. Cheer up, Nancy, said Bess. There's still 2 holes to play. You could win this yet. Chris summoned up his courage and plunged into the woods. He located Nancy's ball in a level spot by a tree. It's almost unplayable, he told her. she caught up to him, Miss Allison had walked on, a self-satisfied expression on her face. Nancy asked for a she and struck the ball with all her strength, offering it some sort of um, ball, I think is what they're called. I'm not really into bowling, even though it's pretty big here in Arizona. Lots of it's shot was remarkable. The ball flew up and sailed cleanly out of the woods. Marvelous, George, called Al. Despite Nancy's remarkable play, her score was 1 point higher than her opponent at the end of the hole. As they walked to the next tee, Nancy remarked, I'm one down now, and she started to add that her hand was paining her, but quickly broke off. Nancy had no intention of giving up easily and managed to tie Ruth Allison on the 17th. As they played toward the last green, she put all her strength into each shot, glancing with pain every time. A tie isn't enough here, she said to herself grimly. I must win by a stroke or I'll lose the match and be out of the tournament. A small crowd had gathered by the green to watch the players come in. Ruth Allison, with victory so near, became excited and made a wild putt. Nancy dropped her ball into the cup, tying the match again. According to the rules, the player had to keep on until one or the other had a lower score. Nancy wondered how much longer her hand could endure the strain. As the two players went back to the first tee, the crowd followed. An audience seemed to bother Ruth Allison. Her drive was short and her next shot went into the rough. She lost the hole by 2 strokes. It was Nancy's match. Oh, you were great, Bess praised her friend briefly while George hugged her. Ruth Allison, instead of offering congratulations, turned on her heel and stalked angrily toward the golf clubhouse office. The poor sport she turned out to be, George said in disgust. When the applause of the crowd was over, Nancy and her friends walked away slowly. They noticed a man who was on the tournament committee hurrying toward them. Evident from the expression on his face that something was amiss. Miss Drew, will you come with me, please? He requested her quietly. There seems to be a little misunderstanding. Your opponent claims the match. Really, Nancy replied her shipper. They were witnesses. Miss Allison claims the match on account of the 16th hole, the man told her gravely. She says I didn't hit your ball after I went into the hole. Nancy was stunned by the false accusation. In the office, she faced Miss Allison. How can you say such a thing? You know it isn't true. It certainly is the I'm sure you are. Otherwise, you never would have reached the I'm sleeping. Nevertheless, I enjoyed both both offers. It's so that because we beat you, that was because of this. I think it's the it is question Miss Ellis's accusation is utterly false. It so happens that as one of the I saw my sister into the trees and watched her execute it. Oh, thank you, she answered gratefully. For the first time, she decided her own heart was good for her. If everyone had thought this true, I may as well drop the charge. Austin said Harley and left the office. Don't mind her, the tournament chairman said to Nancy. She always loses home. I'm sorry to have embarrassed you. Fortescue followed the girls outside, smirking with pleasure. Did you really replay my shot? Nancy asked her. Why, certainly, he returned, his eyes twinkling. Didn't you see me? No, I didn't. You must have been looking in another direction. By the way, did you get my note? Yes, Nancy admitted and politely accepted his invitation to the dance at Hemlock Hall. He said goodbye and walked out. Nancy could not rid herself of the suspicion that Barstow had lied about being in the woods. Later that afternoon, while the three girls were in the soda shop, they were amazed to have the boy at the counter mention Barstow to them. He's a funny guy, the boy said. Spent a long time in here earlier this afternoon. He wrote out a telegram but crumpled it up. As a matter of fact, he wrote out two or three but couldn't seem to get one that suited him. He left one wadded up on the counter and I read it. You did? He said. Sure, see? Here it is. The boy took a crumpled paper from his pocket and waved it. Nancy was able to make out two words in the quick glance she got of the message. Margaret Judson. Want to read it? The boy asked. Nancy shook her head. No, I'm not interested in Mr. Barskew's private affairs. The boy thrust the paper into his pocket again and a moment later was called away to wait on another customer. Nancy left the shop with Bess and George. Sure. When the football She wondered if she had made a mistake in declining to read the telegram. What connection could Barty have with Margaret Judson? I caught only a glimpse of the writing, she said, but I'm sure it wasn't the same as any of the other samples of Barty's. She paused and continued. About the dance tonight, I'd like you and your dates to follow us closely in your car. We'll do our best to keep you in sight, Bess promised. I hope I won't need to send out enough for us, Nancy laughed. Shortly before 9 o'clock, the boys who were to escort Bess and George arrived in the car. Nancy was worried that Barty would ruin her plans by being late, but to her relief, he appeared within a few minutes. I feel just as stressed when I'm relying on someone to like get there, even if it's just making sure family members are ready. And I'm like, oh, I'm late. It used to be a really big issue for me too. Like if I was like even a minute late, I'd be like, oh, I can't go to this event now. But I can't do it. And I would have to push through my embarrassment and anxiety. Anyways, as he assisted her to his car, Nancy glimpsed her friends and a nearby convertible waiting to follow. Every time her escort drove at a moderate pace. When the road straightened out, he speeded up until the other car was left far behind. Oh, let's not go so fast, Nancy protested. This is the way I like to travel. Barney told her. Well, I don't. If you refuse to slow down, I'll never go out with you again. Like, um, they really reduce the speed of the car. For some minutes, they rode in silence. Nancy was wondering if the approach the subject and Miss Anson's conversation about cheating. I didn't know if I pretense of English. Thus, she suggested that perhaps he had not used the wrong idea. It was time to do. Guess if you certainly not. It wouldn't make any difference to me if you had or hadn't. Nancy was not like she see and enjoyable it was to play any competitive game honestly, with a good sportsmanlike attitude. But she decided she would gain nothing by revealing her true feelings. Taking a different tack, she cajoled her escort into a pleasant mood and casually asked him if he knew Miss Judson, whose house had burned. Margaret Judson named differently? Oh, I met her in Europe 3 years ago. A pretty woman, but boring. Where's she living now? She doesn't wish to have her address revealed. I thought she might be staying here. Nancy said, watching her closely. Perhaps she is, Barsky smiled. Another silence followed, which was not broken until they reached Hemlock. Nancy excused herself to go to the party room. She stood there hoping to see Margaret Judson among the persons who came in. Bess and George arrived when she left the room. Try not to lose Barney's car going back to the hotel, Nancy urged. In the meantime, keep your eyes open for one for Jules comments. If you see one, please report to me instantly. Will do, best friends. The music was excellent, but Nancy did not enjoy dancing with Darcy. Finally, she went to the ladies' lounge. There she maintained an alert watch for the woman, the jewels unpacked. This night will be entirely wasted, she thought. Miss Judson isn't here, and there's not a single clue to help Dad's case. Reluctantly, Nancy returned to dance with her Dave. When the music stopped, he took her to a chair and excused himself. I'll be back in a minute, he said, and went. Nancy got up and wandered into a small room adjoining the ballroom to get some fresh air. The place was vacant. Nancy turned to leave, but halted when she heard a low murmur of voices. Two women seated on the porch outside were conversing earnestly near an open window. Their words reached Nancy clearly. But I tell you, I have no money to give you for the compact, the one said in a harassed tone. Please try to understand. How do I know you didn't sell it? The mother asked harshly. The woman lowered their voices so Nancy was unable to hear anything. She swiftly toward the window to listen. I must learn to learn, Nancy thought silently. One of these women may be Margaret Judson. To chapter 10. And then I'm gonna drink some water and then I'm gonna end the book. After I'm done with chapter 10, I will come next Tuesday and finish the book as my plan. I don't stop, but you can get updates on me about reading and other things by going to my Instagram at desert.mermaid, and you'll see updates there. You'll also see things for my mermaiding, and then you can also watch this in its entirety on YouTube if you would like. I would enjoy it if you did. Please like and subscribe, all the things. Detail for apparently the two women heard someone coming. They arose and moved away, walking quickly toward the garden. Nancy's like, okay, I gotta figure this out because I want to know. By the time Nancy came outdoors, they were too far away for her to distinguish either woman in the darkness. But the young detective observed that one was dressed in a flowered silk gown which hung in loose, loose folds from her shoulders. Could she be Margaret Judson? Nancy asked herself. In a few moments they had vanished. Nancy ran down the steps into the garden, sure that the woman had taken one of the winding paths leading from the hotel. I must find them, she thought. A number of couples were enjoying the moonlight, some idling near the fountains. Others were walking slowly up and down as they listened to strains of music from the dance orchestra. Nancy darted here and there, searching frantically. Suddenly, far ahead of her, she thought she saw the woman in the flowered silk dress. Nancy rushed forward. Just then a young couple came from among the trees. Nancy, unable to stop, ran full tilt into them. Oh, I'm terribly sorry, she apologized. You're not hurt, are you? No, the man replied, but watch your step. My bad. Nancy took another path, this time more slowly, but she could not find the woman in the flowered silk and her companion. Finally, Nancy gave up and went back to the hotel lobby. One of the women she said was just entering an elevator. That was my chance, Nancy decided. She was too late to catch the elevator, but raced upstairs. Nancy reached the next floor just as the elevator stopped. The woman in the floor was delighted. She was about Johnson. And a sudden change, Nancy said to her, "Oh, but do you know who Miss Johnson is?" The woman gazed at the girl surprised, but she was up to her. Nancy was amazed to hear Miss Johnson's register at the hotel. The other day, the young woman said that she was not staying there. Do you know the number of her room? No. Nancy hurried downstairs to ask the desk clerk. She just left here, he reported. Decided not to stay after all. Oh, Nancy gasped. Can you tell me her forwarding address? Oh, okay. The niceness of people like being like, oh, let me tell you. Because now I feel like people like, you can't know that information. Why do you want to know? She left none. The young detective was mulling over this bit of news when Martin Barskew sauntered up. Oh, here you are, he said with a trace of annoyance in his tone. I didn't mean to run off, Nancy replied quickly. I thought I saw Miss Johnson enter the elevator. I want to speak with her. Have you seen her tonight? He answered with a mysterious smile. Let's forget Miss Johnson and enjoy this next dance. Against her will, Nancy was led back to the ball. She did not try to escape from her partner again. Shortly before the last dance, she found an opportunity to remind Bess and George to follow closely in her car during the ride back to the hotel. Perhaps. Despite Nancy's fears, the homeward drive proved to be uneventful. She took sorry, the water hit the back of my throat. She tumbled into bed, tired and discouraged by her unsuccessful detective work that evening. Nancy wondered if Bertie had gone to the dance to meet Margaret Judson. The weary young sleuth fell asleep. At 6, she was awakened by the alarm on her travel clock. Who left that turned on? Nancy moaned drowsily. Then she remembered having said it herself. Soon it would be time for her to drive to the airport to meet her father. By 7 o'clock, father and daughter were seated opposite each other at a table in the airport restaurant. Did you have a successful trip, Dad? His daughter asked as soon as they had given their breakfast order. What did you learn about the contents of the brass chest? The New York police said only one article in the entire collection proved to be stolen property. The jeweled compact? Yes. The other articles couldn't be identified. Of course, they may have been stolen recently and the theft was not reported. At any rate, the jewelry, with the exception of the compact, is not on the list of articles smuggled into this country by the international mail. Nancy listened to a more detailed account of her father's visit to New York. Then she revealed her own activities. I was sure I'd located Miss Judson on him on call, Nancy finished. What did I learn before I could talk to her? We must trace her, Mr. said. From the clues you gathered, I'm certain she's the woman we're after. The lawyer wished to drive without delay to Hemlock Hall to look for Margaret Judson, and Nancy was glad to accompany him. The trip proved to be a waste of time. Although they inquired at the airport, gas stations, and various shops, no one could give them any information about Miss Judson's whereabouts. Dad, said Nancy, I'm afraid I'll have to stop sleeping and hurry back to our hotel. My name is posted to play in the golf tournament at 2 o'clock. The Drews ate lunch, then drove to Deer Mountain. Nancy quickly changed to golf clothes and went out on the course. As usual, Chris was her caddy. The match was close. Nancy, scarcely noticing the pain in her hand, played an excellent game. To the delight of her friends, she won the 15th hole. As she finished out the round, she jokingly asked Chris if he had found her Jimmy Harlow book. I don't think I'll ever find it now, he told her gloomily. Maybe somebody else picked it up. Have you noticed anyone in the woods by the bridge? Nancy asked. This morning I saw a man poking a stick around in the mud by the stream. Nancy pressed for a more detailed description of the person, but Chris was unable to give one. On her way back to the hotel, she reflected on the clue that Chris unknowingly had revealed. That man he saw may have been the Judson gardener, she thought, or possibly someone who was approaching from a brass chest I found in the button. Nancy was afraid it might be too late to locate the man, but she decided to investigate the haunted bridge area. Beth and George were eager to assist in Nancy's search. The three girls stepped off the course of the golf course. They were only a few steps from the stop. Here comes our pest party, she explained. Now what do we do? Thinking very quickly, Nancy greeted the newcomer with a warm smile. Oh, Mr. Bartescue, did my father see you this afternoon? Why, no, he answered in surprise, falling into the trap. Did he wish to speak with me? Well, he was looking for a tennis partner. Martin Bartescue had boasted to Nancy that he excelled in some sports. Tennis and golf, however, he played were his favorites. I see Dad on the terrace, Nancy cried, and motioned for him to join their group. Dad, I've found a wonderful tennis partner for you, she declared as he came up. The lawyer suspected that Nancy wished to rid herself of Fortescue and agreed to get his tennis shoes and racket and meet the other man at the course. The girls made their way toward the haunted bridge. Dark clouds were moving swiftly overhead, and by the time they reached the woods, a strong wind was blowing. Soon they were within view of the old bridge. Dark clouds were moving swiftly overhead, and by the time they reached the woods, a strong wind was blowing. Uh, Soon they were within view of the old bridge. Bess shivered and kept close to her companions. Suddenly they were starting to hear the same moaning and groaning sounds which had perplexed them on their first visit. Oh, Bess squealed, clutching George's arm. Nancy warned her to be quiet, and for several minutes the girls stood perfectly still, waiting for the sound to be repeated. There was only a rustle of leaves in the breeze. I believe the noise came from somewhere right around here, said Nancy. Let's investigate. Maybe we'll find someone in hiding, playing a joke. The girls searched through the brush and trees near both ends of the bridge. But found no one. Then they explored the trail they had seen on their previous visit, which led along the ravine. Footprints were clearly visible. Had someone used the path within the past 24 hours? A moment later, a shrill scream broke the stillness. This time Nancy was certain that the cry had come from some distance up the ravine. Let's go, she urged excitedly. We'll solve the mystery of these strange sounds yet. She darted forward along the path, oblivious to the thorny bushes that tore at her hair and clothing. Suddenly Nancy halted and stared. In a small clearing ahead with a log cabin, smoke was curling lazily from the chimney. I didn't know anyone lived here in the woods, Bess gasped in surprise. Nancy was debating what to do when the cabin door opened and a man carrying a rifle emerged. He's the same one who was working near the Judson property, Nancy whispered. I'll bet he's the gardener. Let's see what he's up to with that rifle, she added. The man shouldered his gun and struck off in the general direction of the Judson property. I'm sure he's only going hunting, George declared. Cautiously, the girls followed him. Suddenly, Bess tripped over a mossy log. As she fell headlong on the trail, she gave a faint outcry. The man immediately paused and glanced back. The trio crouched low. Apparently satisfied that the sound he had heard was made by some wild animal, the hunter slowly walked on again. Moments later, the girls heard a loud explosion and saw a sudden flash of fire. They gasped in horror as the man uttered a sharp moan of pain. He's hurt, Nancy cried and darted forward. The victim was lying still on the ground when the girls reached his side. Nancy bent anxiously over him and was relieved to find him breathing. A slight trickle of blood oozed from a wound in his forehead. The young detective glanced at the man's rifle, which lay on the ground a short distance away. His gun must have gone off accidentally, Nancy surmised, then added, We'd better not move him. Let's get a doctor at once. I'll run back to the hotel, George offered. You're not afraid to cross the haunted bridge alone? Bess asked quietly. George shook her head. Of course not. As she hurried out of sight, Nancy studied the darkening sky. I hope the rain holds off, at least until the doctor gets here, she said. But within a few minutes it began to rain. Nancy and Bess carried the man to his cabin and laid him gently on a bed in the rear room. Bess looked for a clean towel and put a cold compress on his head. Puddles of water were forming on the floor beneath the open windows. Nancy hurriedly closed them. One of the sashes in the bedroom was stuck fast, and she looked about the kitchen for a tool to loosen it. When she opened a drawer of the high cupboard, Nancy came upon an assortment of papers. Thinking she might find a letter to identify the unconscious man, Nancy swiftly examined. Yeah, because it's totally okay to do that, kids just finding out who he is. The picture was a beautiful young girl. Across the bottom in a bold scrawl were the words, To my faithful friend Joe Halley, Aunt Judson. Nancy thought of the man who lay motionless on the bed. Was he Joe Halley, and was Joe Halley the Judson gardener? The girl in the photograph is the one I met in the powder room at Hamlet College, she told herself. I was afraid about her identity. Nancy, aren't you going to close that window? Wes looked directly across the window. After putting the photograph back in the drawer, Nancy continued her search for a tool. Finally, she found a hammer, and using it gently lowered the sash. At the same moment, a wild cry came from behind the cabin. What was that? Bess called in terror. We'll have to find out in chapter 11, Telephone Disguise, next time on Tuesday, the 12th. Thank you so much for joining in. I'm hoping to see you guys later. Again, please follow me on Instagram, the mermaid. It's my mermaid page and Instagram page. And you'll be able to see things. I also have a mermaid and stethoscope shop that you can get to on Teespring. That's inspired by mermaiding and also being, excuse me, also being part of my career and with mermaids involved. So I'll thank you so much for tuning into the Haunted Bridge. We are halfway through. We read chapters 1 through 10 and we left on a cliffhanger. Until next time, I'll see you guys later, and thanks for dropping by.